Okay, I know that people are still filtering in, but I am going to go ahead and get started for the people that are here. And this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about how to achieve some balance in your life via a sensory diet. And this applies not just to the individual in the autism spectrum, but it's something that's important to each and every one of us, that we achieve some kind of balance in our life between things that are the pleasures in life and the stresses in life. So, balance in life. We all want it, but what is it? What does it take in order to achieve that balance? And balance between what? So, it's balance between stresses and pleasures. So what stresses you? What are your stresses? And for example, on a personal level, not having enough time, not having enough money are stresses. Not having to make decisions and choices when you would really rather not have to. Feeling alone or misunderstood are those potential stresses in your life. Life changes are always stresses in people's lives. Socially, competition at work, conflicts at home, social injustices, etc., etc. There are plenty of sources of stresses in everyone's life. What stresses autistic individuals? And I talked about this morning about different perceptions, different perspectives. So let's look, are there differences in what stresses us? I would say environmental is a huge source of stress for those of us with sensory sensitivities. People talk too much. They expect too much. Certainly the smells, the tastes, the touch, all of those sensory kinds of things can be sources of stress to us. For me, certainly sudden, unexpected sounds of any kind will result in a startle response, which is a major stress to me. If people do things or say things that I'm not expecting, it can really throw me off. As far as personal stresses, being interrupted is one of the, because we hyperfocus, that's the way we're able to function, is by blocking out other things that would be distracting to us and hyperfocusing. Then being interrupted is a major stress. My husband and I went through this where I was working at the computer and he came up and said something which immediately demands that I shift my attention from what I was focused on to what he had to say, only to find what he said was not something we hadn't talked about before. It was nothing new, nothing urgent. And I thought, okay. Well, he did this 3 times. He would leave, come back, say something. And by the 3rd time, I was either going to blow it, go into a meltdown, or I said, okay, this is it. You seem to need my attention. So you have my total undivided attention. Now I'm going to hyper-focus on you. So I turned my chair around and I said, okay, what do you want to talk about? And he said, no, I'm just being social. And I just being social. And I said, well, so what do you want to talk about? And he said, no, this isn't how you be social. Social is spontaneous. You just do it. You don't sit down and plan it and focus on it like this. And I said, but I don't do spontaneous. And so, but the whole idea of my having to make that shift to auditory processing, I have to give him credit. He really came through to me and figured out for himself because I explained that auditory, that interruption, was very distracting. It's very hard for me to shift focus to processing because I may miss the first few part of what he's saying, and then just auditory processing is stressful for me. But visual processing is not. So he learned to come up silently within my peripheral vision and simply wait for me to shift my attention to him. What a difference. Huge. it was not stressful at all. And this was probably the first time I really, truly understood what love was. When someone is willing to change their behavior for you, to accommodate you. And he did do that, just on his own, figuring out that it was less stressful. He took to heart what I had to say about, I don't do spontaneous social. And we were able to work that situation out, which was fabulous. So, another thing that stresses autistic individuals is certainly not having friends, or the opposite of being pushed to have friends when you're not really ready for it. Having to do things at other people's pace or time frame. Those are the kind of stresses that stress us out. We may not think of money or time as being a big factor, as you may, in terms of what stresses you. In fact, I know many an autistic, including myself. Unfortunately, I have a husband that helped me get through it. Money, if I have it and you don't, I'll just give it away. Time, if I'm hyper-focused on something, time is irrelevant. I could go on forever. I will forget to eat. And when my husband was traveling a lot and he was gone, I'd forget to eat. It would be 8 o'clock, and I realized, I didn't eat any dinner. Or, it would be midnight, and I usually go to bed by 10 because I have to get up, and I forgot that. I can get lost in time. So those are not stresses necessarily, except that having to do it by other people's standards and meet their expectations for time. So what stresses us can be quite different because we have different perspectives on things. So let's look at what typical people find pleasurable. Sensory experiences can be very pleasurable. The Ben & Jerry's ice cream in the freezer, you think about, I've had a horrible day, I need to treat myself. Taking a long hot shower or a bubble bath can feel wonderful. Just getting a hug from somebody can break that tension and make you feel less stressful. Socializing, getting together with other people. This was a shock to me as an occupational therapist. I worked in the school system, and I would walk through the hallways and see these teachers out in the hallways socializing, just talking to each other. And I thought, I wonder if the principal knows that they're socializing on the job when they should be working. Because to me, when you worked, you worked. You didn't socialize. That was for outside of work. Until someone explained to me that people actually enjoy socializing, and they actually do it as a source of pleasure to break the stress of the work. And it was like, okay, this is very strange to me, because the two were totally separate things. I certainly didn't find any pleasure in socializing. That was work. I found the work actually much more pleasurable. Okay, the absence of stress certainly can people find pleasurable, just not having to deal with stress. So those are things that I have found typical people would relate to. But they're not necessarily the same things that autistic people would find pleasurable. Because of the sensory sensitivities, because of the language issues that make socializing more work than stress relieving, certainly the absence of stress we would relate to as well. But so how do we find a balance between what stresses us and what we find pleasurable that is a release from that stress that helps us then go back and handle the rest of the stresses that are facing us? Let's talk about then, how can a sensory diet help us find that balance? And what is a sensory diet? Just like food is important to you in life, it keeps you going. You need food for energy. You need it. Without it, you're going to die. So just like food, sensory input is very, very important to your functioning throughout the day. A sensory diet helps you achieve that balance. You can receive pleasure through your senses. That helps you with that kind of balance. Your senses can alert you to when there's danger or there's stresses that you can then adapt to and see if you can forestall something that might be a stress so that it is less stressful. You can adapt to it. Your senses will trigger your hormones as far as your fight, flight, fright, or freeze hormones. When you sense something is going on, your senses will pick up, uh-oh, this isn't right. Immediately it alerts you. It can trigger that adrenaline that makes you act. So what comes in through your senses can help you in coping with the stresses of life. What you perceive through your senses is not the same as others, you're not going to necessarily respond to the stresses in life in the same way or in the same manner. So for an autistic individual, they may need more assistance or support in learning how to cope with the various stresses in their lives. Because as I explained earlier, they don't know what their options are and what they might be able to do. So a sensory diet should work like a nutritional diet in terms of you need a balance in the kind of nutrients you take in. And what I'm talking about is a balance between what is calming or inhibiting to your nervous system and what is excitatory or very stimulating to your nervous system. You want to have a balance so that you have that just right state of alertness where you can handle things. You're not too overwhelmed by them, but you're also not so sedated by them. You want to provide enough, but not too many calories, which I consider input, as a source of energy, the energy which drives you to take the actions that you need to do in order to perform. A sensory diet, like a nutritional diet, is you need it distributed over the course of the day in the form of meals, which are big input sources, which are planned experiences, or snacks, sort of as needed breaks, to help you maintain the energy level and replenish as needed. Now, most of you do this instinctively. You know when you need that cigarette or that cup of coffee to keep you going. And you go ahead and get what you need. And that gets you through the day. But for an autistic individual, we may not realize that we have other options than what we see other people do that may not work for us. So oftentimes, consider what you're doing to help yourself have the breaks and those planned experiences, leisure activities that you do that help you balance out your life as far as the stresses are concerned. We may need some support from you in able to figure out how to balance some of those stresses in our lives. So, if you change the input that goes in, you change the behavior that comes out. That makes logical sense. Some input is excitatory. As I've said, as far as the foods, very excitatory foods, movement can be very, very excitatory, and certainly being scared, something that's scary is very excitatory. These are samples of what I'm saying, input that can be very stimulating or excitatory. Some input is very inhibitory, such as a deep massage. You just think about it, makes you feel more relaxed. Exercising. You know that feel that when you're done with exercising, you feel just calm and in control. There's that input through the muscles and joints, as I've said, is always calming to the nervous system. Just walking on cool sand can be, for some people, very calming. That's why people like to walk along in wet sand. It just feels good, that deep pressure as you sink into it. Most input, if it's not purely excitatory, predominantly inhibitory, is what we call balanced input. Eating an apple. It's inhibitory because you're using your jaw, your muscles. Input through the muscles and joints is always calming. But the taste of the apple may be very stimulating or excitatory to you. So it's one of those activities that it feels just right. But if you're autistic and you don't have a good feel in your mouth, the sense of touch inside your mouth, you can't feel that chunk of apple. So you never are sure if you break it and crunch down part of it, another part may slip down because you don't feel it, and you're going to aspirate on it. So eating an apple may actually be a source of anxiety or a source of stress for you because you're not getting the sensory feel. You need to feel in control of what's in your mouth and how to move it around so that it doesn't go down before you're ready to deal with it. So it's thrown off by the sensory and the differences in the sensory. So that's not. Getting dressed. Again, muscles and joints. Every time you use muscles and joints, it's inhibitory, but coordinating the colors or simply feeling dressed, the good feel of having the texture of the clothes that you enjoy can make it a stimulator thing. You may wear things that you particularly like, colors that you like, because that's stimulatory to you. It feels good. So getting dressed can actually be a very balanced activity. But for the individual who perceives things differently, getting dressed can be a true organizational chore. Well, I have to remember to do this, then I have to remember to do this, and how do I do that? And you have to consciously think your way through all the stages of getting the clothes on. You don't like the feel of the clothes. Oh, that's too cold on my skin because it's not cotton. It's a different feel to it. Or I don't like things that are tight, or I don't like things that are too loose. From the sensory aspect, that becomes another stressor in life, which may be why many autistic children through adults prefer the same clothes over and over. I mean, Temple Grandin, she has her favorite clothes, and that's what she wears, Western-style clothes. That's what she's comfortable in, and that's what she wears 24/7. And so you have to learn to adapt to it because that can be a source of stress. Certainly sitting around and talking with other people can be a source of stress for an autistic, where for others it's a just right kind of experience in that it's stimulating based on the topics that you're talking about, but it's also inhibitory because you're using your muscles and joints to do the talking. You're sitting, as you can see that these ladies, they're propping their elbows on the table. That provides them with a sense of, okay, calmness. You know, we're not moving, nothing's happening, we're safe, we're okay where we are. Their body sense says, I'm cool here, and they enjoy the stimulating conversation. But for an autistic, this can be another source of stress. So being aware of what you find comforting may not be what others find comforting in terms of helping to find that balance in life between what is pleasure and what is stress. So if you look at it from this perspective, if you perceive most input as too excited, too inhibitory, you're going to have a difference in the way you respond to it. If the input that you're taking in seems too excitatory, you're going to be alert to everything, highly distracted, having difficulty focusing on what's being said or being done. You can be easily upset or overloaded. You tend to avoid input from your environment. In other words, you try to shut it down or control it somehow. Or you may become very angry or annoyed. All of these are possible reactions to an experience that is too excitatory for you. If it's too inhibitory, you may be unobservant. You're just zoned out in your own world and you're not taking any information in. Or you're hyper-focused on one thing, which means you're excluding everything else. You may appear very uninterested or unmotivated. You actually may seek to create your own input, which is what you do when you're bored anyway. If you're not getting enough stimulation and the presentation is not all that exciting for you, you may doodle or you may fiddle with something. We all do that. But you're going to see it in an autistic individual to an extreme, because we do that well. You may seem very oblivious toward others, this individual. You're going to see the extremes because the input they're getting is not just right. Someone who's receiving input that's just right is going to be able to filter out the unimportant input and to pay attention to only what is important. They're going to want to engage and explore because they can handle it. It's not too much, it's not too little. They're interested enough, they're going to want to explore and learn more. They're going to seek input from the environment as opposed to avoiding it or creating their own input. They're going to be attending to the input that they are receiving, and they're going to enjoy interactions with others. There's a difference between someone who's getting input that's too much, too little. So if you can use this as a guide to decide, okay, are they getting too much input? Are they getting too little input? You can adjust the amount of input that they're getting to hopefully get them to a just right state, which is what we're going to talk about now, is how do you get to a just right state when things are too much or too little. If you're starting from an excess of stimulation, there's just too much to process. What you want to do to help that individual is provide some inhibition to help balance it. For example, if you see that they can't focus their attention on what's happening, what they're supposed to be doing, ask them questions. Shifting to the thinking level of the brain, there are 3 inhibitory ways that the brain works to calm you down. One is thinking. And autistics do very well with logic and reasoning. We don't do well when people tell us what to do. We look at it as criticism. We look at it as, you're telling me how to run my life and I don't deal with it. But asking questions is a very effective strategy with us in terms of what do you think would happen if you tried it this way? Or have you thought about this option as opposed to that option? Asking us questions and engaging us in thinking helps to focus our attention. For little children, I had this one preschool teacher who was quite frustrated because when they had to have PE in the classroom because the weather was not conducive to being outside, for whatever reason, especially the summer months can get kind of hot in Phoenix. And so she said it would just end up in chaos. She would be, the kids would just be everywhere, and she couldn't seem to control them. And so I went through this. How can we build more inhibition into it? Well, one of the strategies was to have them, the children count, because they were working on counting anyway. So as they did an activity, they would have to do it 5 times. So if you're going to jump on the trampoline, you jump 5 times and then move on to the next thing. Having it in a sequence or an order, like an obstacle course, in which they had to do things in a particular order, would bring it down to a level where they had to focus on the order in which they were doing things. So that made it more calming and inhibitory. One of the other strategies, input to the muscles and joints. So having them do heavy, what I call heavy work activities, was very calming as well. So rather than expecting them to sit quietly and do something, they could do movement, which is very stimulating, but they also had to have input to the muscles and joints. So they would have to jump, or they would have to stomp, or they would have to, anything that required their bodies to have to, or lifting something that would require their bodies to do something that required muscle strength, because that is calming to them. And again, providing anything that's repetitive, rhythmical, slow, familiar, all of those things are calming to the nervous system. So I helped her design this obstacle course that the kids could go through, that each time they had to do it X number of times and then move on to the next thing. So it was structured, but still allowed them the movement that they really needed. What was interesting as a result is she came back to me and she said, you know what? It is working so incredibly well. And she said, you know why? I have my assistant doing it. She said, I found that if they get stimulated, I get stimulated. And it's a vicious cycle. I get stimulated, they get more stimulated. And so she said, it's far better. My aide works, she's calm, she keeps her voice low, and she runs that group, and it is, she said, it's just heavenly. It's wonderful. The kids are all very cooperative. So sometimes you have to be aware of yourself as a source of sensory input as well. If you're the kind of hyperverbal person, always touching, always emotional, all those things that can be excitatory, and you're working with someone who's already easily on overload, you yourself can be the source of their anxiety and their stress. So be aware that you may need to practice some of these things to bring yourself down so that you keep them from being so easily overstimulated by things. Food for thought. Certainly you want to decrease the amount and intensity of excitatory input in the environment itself. So all right, how do you get to a just right state? If you are already the kind of individual that needs more stimulation, you're the kind of individual like I was when I grew up. I was in my own world. I quite enjoyed it. I was oblivious to everything and everyone around me, and I was quite content. So how do you get my attention? How do you get me to shift to pay attention and have the energy to do the things that you want me to do? Well, you have to provide more input to me, more stimulatory input to get my attention, which means movement. Movement is always stimulating. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to ask everyone here to stand up. I'm going to continue my presentation. I just want you to do it in a standing position. Now, you don't have to if you don't want to, but for those who are willing to try it, would you please stand up? Okay. Now, you are standing as opposed to sitting. And actually what I expected is that in the process of standing, that you were also going to be doing more talking, which is typically what happens. Once I give you the chance to move, and in fact, if I let you roam, it would be difficult to not, but you were also good. You may continue to stand if that relieves you of the pressure on your buttocks muscles from sitting so long. Sometimes you need to have that change in input to stay alert and attentive. So sometimes it's just the change. But sounds, auditory input, tactile touch, smells, all of those can be very, very stimulating. You are welcome to sit down if you would like. But you're welcome to stand up if you also like, if it makes you helpful. And there's one up there that did the extra stretch. And just think about it. How does that make you feel? It makes you feel good to do those kinds of things. You need sometimes that input to your muscles and joints to help you stretch, feel good. It decreases, it's calming to the nervous system to do that. But if you're already so calm, you need more input. So you're going to have to increase the input without sending me into being overwhelmed on the other extreme. But provide me an opportunity to get some movement. Provide me with not necessarily more auditory input, but perhaps a little more intense input without being so loud. More kinds of the light touch of a tap on the shoulder rather than the pressure. That kind of thing will get your attention. Increasing intensity, speed, randomness, and novelty of the input. For a lot of the kids in school, I would recommend to the teachers that they use highlighters to get their attention. Highlight what they're supposed to be reading, and then have them go find the answer and highlight it, which actually that ability to, it just provides a little more extra input that they seem to be seeking because they're a sensory seeker, because they're not getting enough input. Giving them the addition of colors, That certainly helps me, gets my attention. Background music can make a big difference to me in terms of being more alerting or stimulating, unless it's very jarring, but again, things that I tolerate very well can get my attention and help me to respond better. Certainly change, and there are some children that having that little bit of unexpected. You want the routine, but every once in a while you throw in something that's not quite expected. Boy, that'll get their attention for those who are under-responsive. So don't keep everything quite so routine. You always want to throw in a little surprise somewhere, and you're going to get their attention. You don't want things to be the opposite of where it's too calming, it's too routine. You're going to lose their attention very quickly. And I have children like that after they've done it a few times, that's it, they're bored, they're done. They don't want to do it anymore. So I have to change it up. We suddenly shift to doing it just a little bit differently. Not enough to throw them that this is a whole new thing, but throw in there a twist and to keep them on their toes, and that works. All right, how to maintain. Once you get to that just right state where you've got your attention, you've got your focus, how do you keep it? Because that's difficult sometimes. So we look at, okay, our main meals, which are our planned sensory experiences. You want to do at the beginning of the day something that is alerting, that helps them to get started on the day. Midday, you want to relook at, okay, where are they? Are they a little overwhelmed? Do we need to do some calming things? Are they bored and understimulated where we've got to do something more alerting to get them back in balance? And certainly at the end of the day then, you want to look at calming activities. What helps their nervous system to calm so that they can fall asleep? And the ironic thing is a lot of my adolescents that I work with have a lot of difficulty in falling asleep at night. Part of it is, or actually a great part of it is, that that's the time of day when everyone else stops. All the external input from family members and in your environment, it stops. Suddenly they have, and they can create their own input, be in control of it. Mostly it's on the computer. Yes, they're hyper-focusing, but they have difficulty falling asleep, shutting down, because now they're creating their own input, and it's very stimulating for them to get on the computer, play games, email with friends, and they don't know how to calm themselves back down in order to fall asleep. So they're up really late at night, have trouble getting up again in the morning. Their whole cycle is thrown off because they have not learned how to calm themselves at night so they can sleep, do alerting things in the morning that wake them up, and learn how to rebalance at midday. As far as taking breaks throughout the day, just as you would go for that coffee break or cigarette break or the social break that you might, autistics aren't going to seek those kinds of things. They're going to be seeking other kinds of stimulation that helps them to calm down or become more stimulated as needed. So whatever they have, it has to be portable. It has to be non-distracting to other people because they're going to need it. And it has to be self-limiting so that they reach that just right state in about 5 minutes. And so that you have to look at, for example, what did I do with it? One of the organizers was standing there with a twiddle toy, and I was like, ooh, I love things that spin, because I'm the kind of person that's under-registered, and I love things that are excitatory. I like the feel of it. I like the motion, the stimulation. Okay, that kind of thing, sensory input, I find actually somewhat calming, because it gets me to that just right state that feels good, because I'm in one of those low registration states. And so for me, this additional input is very, very, gets me to that just right state that I'm But for someone who is already excitatory, that's not the kind of thing they would want. They would probably want something that involves input to the muscles and joints. And I'll be giving more examples of that in just a second. But I always carry with me a set of earplugs for when it's going to be overstimulating. I'm in an environment like an airport or a restaurant where it's just too much. I carry earplugs with me. I always carry a sensory toy of some kind like this that I would fiddle with in my hands that's going to be discreet but not making noises that I can to help me calm down if I need to or to stimulate me if I need to. I have a whole collection of pens that do interesting kinds of things that have lights and it's functional so that I take it with me so that I have something that's stimulatory when I need it. I come prepared. So depending on the state I'm in, I can readjust that state with simple tools that I have with me that I call sensory tools. And helpfully get to that just right state within about 5 minutes. Now, in the morning, to give an example of some alerting activities that you might do, grooming routines can have built-in excitatory kinds of smells, kinds of touches. When you take a bath or a shower, I mean, I've recommended they go to Bed Bath & Beyond and really explore, because they have a great variety of things that washing yourself with, I have this huge brush that I use, very, very stimulating, rather than just the soap. That does nothing. But I feel much more energized and ready to tackle the day when I've had that kind of extra sensory stimulation of using a brush on my skin when I shower. Certain kinds of smells, I can handle lavender, but they have to be natural smells, not the chemical kinds, because those drive me wild. But explore with the individual on the spectrum and find out how they feel about the various forms of input, what feels stimulating to them, what feels very calming to them, things that they like, that they find pleasurable. I had a young man who, a lot of difficulties with the grooming activities. Mom said he fought them, he just did not want to do them, and I knew he had tactile sensitivity issues, so I did the same thing, suggested that she go to the store with him and re-explore as far as brushing his teeth, showering or bathing, dressing. Look and learn from him as to what feels good. And he needed the experience of learning what I don't like the feel of, what I do like the feel of, and simply replaced the tools that he uses for grooming. Huge difference. He was able to tolerate it, now does it independently. It was a matter of simply respecting his preferences and making the tasks pleasurable rather than painful or uncomfortable. Okay, some examples of what you could do in the midday to rebalance. Certainly, leisure play can be very alerting and stimulating to someone who needs that. Doing chores, because it requires the heavy work of the muscles to do things, can be very calming to somebody who's already worked up. Assuming they see some sense in doing the chores, but it has to be something that makes sense to them. Having time for their special interests is very calming. Doing something new can be very alerting. Setting the table and cleaning up after meals is going to be very calming. But preparing the food, because of the smells and the different things that you do, can be very alerting to someone who needs it. Those are just simple examples of common everyday things that you could do that would make a difference when you understand where they're coming from. At the end of the day, things that are calming are, again, things that are easy, cognitive, or repetitive, such as reading, puzzles, are things that will help the nervous system calm down. Taking a long bath may work unless they don't like the feel, but the temperature has to be just right. Sometimes showers are much better because that heavy beating feel. It's a matter of exploring sensory experiences with the autistic individual to find out what effect it has on them. and then using that information to help them rebalance their lives when they're feeling overwhelmed or they're feeling understimulated and unable to focus on tasks. Some of the grooming routines, again, can be calming at the end of the day, but you've got to find out they're going to be different than the grooming activities they do in the morning. So take a look at what, these are just examples, and you can read them on the slides and the handouts that you have, so I'm not going to go over them. But how do you build vestibular input, which is stimulatory for most, into a sensory diet? You know, sitting on a therapy ball when you eat, hey, that's fine at home, or just an air cushion that you sit on your put on your seat. That gives you wiggle room without you actually getting up. That may provide more, but opportunities to have somewhere where that you have a swing, or just anywhere that you can run or move, that kind of movement. And I had a client or a student that I worked with in the special school district, school that I was working in, and he was laying on the floor when I walked in. So I picked up my little chart that shows high, low, and in between, kind of the just right, the too stimulated, too understimulated. And I shoved it down to the understimulated and said, oh, you look like you're tired. He took it, shoved it up to the top, turned it around where I had pecs on the back side for options that he could do, and pointed to the run. In other words, he was saying, I need to run. So we did. We ran up and down the hallway until he was ready to come back in class, and at that point he was at the just right state to pay attention and do what he wanted to do. But otherwise, he was actually understimulated. He needed the stimulation, and that's what he was trying to tell me, is that I'm understimulated. And he knew to ask for it, and he was nonverbal. Vestibular tools can be something to jump on, a hammock swing that you can cuddle into that's very calming if you rock slowly, a ball you can sit and bounce on, or like I said, the cushion seat. These are all possible tools you could use. Proprioceptive, input to the muscles and joints. How can that be part of a sensory diet? For those that need calm down time. Standing to take a shower rather than sitting in a bath is you certainly get far more input that way. Chore times, meal times, leisure times, these are all concrete suggestions for activities that you could do and that you and the individual should try together and see. In fact, I really recommend, because just like anyone else, an autistic individual doesn't like to feel they're the only one doing things, that they're the exception. So I really recommend, don't ask them to try anything that you haven't. Do it together. And then talk about the differences. Oh, this makes me really stimulated. Oh my, I feel, and whereas to them it may make them feel just right. So talk about those differences, which is great, but you're enjoying a sensory experience together, and they see you do it, so therefore it's okay that they do it. It's the same thing with using like an augmentative communication device. People expect that I'm allowed to talk to them and do it my way, and they're supposed to communicate their way. Well, it's like, okay, I'm going to talk to you in English, and I expect you to talk to me in French, and I'm supposed to understand you, and you're supposed to understand me when that's not our primary language. It doesn't make sense. That's not communication. We have to communicate using the same language. And it's the same way with anything else. Make sure that you try it so that you know what it feels like to you, but also respect that it can feel differently to them. And they'll try it. Some proprioceptive tools that might be helpful are anything that has to do with weights. Beanbag chairs are great because you nestle in them and it gives you deep pressure to the muscles. These are ways, if you need to get the attention of someone who is way too easily overstimulated, You can get them that just right state where they can pay attention because you're giving them the inhibitory input that their muscles and joints aren't giving to them on an easy automatic level. Other sensory diet tools that can be built into the day or as what I call snacks, the sense of touch, a pet. That light touch can be very stimulatory to someone who needs to be in a just right state, or can be very calming to someone. If they give them hugs, they like that, like a big dog that loves hugs, that's fine. Now they're getting the calming input they need. Gardening is a wonderful sensory experience because you get the heavy weight of carrying water over to water them. You get some of the light touch, which is more stimulating, by plucking the dead leaves and grooming them. Some individuals that are easily overwhelmed may function better. You need to block out everything. Just find a spot where you can put the things down and they can focus on it because there's nothing. You've taken away all the visual and other distractions. For some, just having the movement of fish and their regular movements can be very calming, as it is to you, and have that available in the environment. Music, certain kinds of music is very stimulating, others are very inhibitory. Explore all of the sensory things that you never even have to think about. And you found your niche. Help the individual to find their sensory tools that help them. I know when I was working, I would call my husband to let him know I was on the way home, and he would automatically ask me, do you need downtime? Which meant after working a full day, depending on which state I was in, I mean, I knew enough about sensory integration to decide, yes, I do need downtime, because if I don't take that time to rebalance myself, my husband would see at dinner time, he would say, you're there, but you're not here. And he could tell that I was simply not able to be with it to talk about anything. Even though I was physically there and trying to do things, I couldn't. But spend 10 minutes rocking on my balls or swinging in my hammock swing, depending on whether I needed to stimulate myself or calm myself, made a world of difference in my ability to sit down, have dinner, and actually have a conversation with my husband. Okay, tactile input is part of a sensory diet. These are all examples, again, of various activities that can be very alerting or very calming that you might try with an individual to see what reaction they have. The same thing with oral sensory motor. Things in your mouth, which is why people do the things they do in terms of putting things in their mouth, chewing on pens or straws or whatever it is in their mouth, is very calming to the nervous system. It's very centering. It helps you. So these are other suggestions, concrete suggestions for what you might use that can be either stimulatory or inhibitory, depending on that person's state at the time that they try it, that can help them to function. I remember a student that I had to advocate for. He had ADHD, and we explored a lot of these sensory experiences in our sessions, and we talked about, and he tried gum, which was very oral. But in fact, any oral kind of thing would help him focus, because he was the kind of kid in class that would just blurt out answers all the time. He was fidgeting and moving in his chair all the time. And it was distracting to others as well as interrupting. And he found that, yes, if I could just chew gum, I feel so focused. And plus the gum kept him from blurting answers out because he had something to do with his mouth. So I brought him to the teacher, and in front of the teacher said, look, we have discovered that chewing gum helps him to feel very just right and able to focus his attention. I know it's against school policy. What I'm asking you is, if this tool works for him to focus his attention and stop blurting out in class. Would you be willing to look the other way? Now, if he takes advantage of that and or isn't accomplishing that goal of staying focused on his work, then he is subject to the rules like everybody else. In other words, he gets sent to the principal's office or he has all his gum taken away. So we establish the rules right there. This has to be an effective tool. It's not to be a special treat. It's not to be that he gets to do something other kids don't get to do. He's not to lord it over anyone. He must be discreet. Under those conditions, are you willing to give it a try? And the teacher said yes. So, what did he do? Promptly test the limits. I have gum and you don't, to his peers, chewing very loudly so that they could see he was getting away. And of course, he was subject to punishment. Immediately, all the gum was taken away, which meant then he couldn't have it as a tool to help him focus, which truly was important to him. He learned very, very quickly to chew discreetly. And the next time I came to observe him, he was sitting calmly in his chair, he was focused on the task, and I could see barely the movement that I knew he had the gum in his mouth. But he made a world of difference to him and the teacher, and she was willing to sort of look the other way. It can make a huge difference. All right, even taste and smell can be part of a sensory diet for those that find it very calming or very stimulatory, depending on what they need. And I've identified some excitatory, stimulating kinds of input and some calming kinds of input that you might try. This is a program called How Does Your Engine Run? It's a leader's guide to the ALERT program for self-regulation. And it is almost a course. It actually teaches the individual by using pictures and specific concrete activities. It's a wonderful book if you're looking for some guidance in how to actually implement this sort of exploratory experience. This is just one example of, okay, if you put something in your mouth, how does it make you feel? Hard, crunchy food, chewy food, how does it make you feel? You explore each one individually. It has pictures to help them understand the difference between when my engine runs high, when my engine runs low. This is a very, the terminology is very, very acceptable to autistic individuals because it doesn't place blame. It's like, it's not your fault that you're overstimulated. It's not your fault that you're not paying attention. All you simply say is, it looks like your engine's running low. It looks like your engine's running high. So what do we do about it? The analogy being, if you're in a car and you've got the car in neutral and you start gunning the gas, you're not getting anywhere. You know, you're doing too much, but you're not getting anywhere. So what do you need to do to get where you need to go? If you're in a car that is running way under the speed limit, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Other people may find it very irritating because you're going too slow. How can we speed you up? It uses that analogy so that they don't feel badly about it. They understand the need to change what they're doing to get to that just right state to stay attentive and alert to what's going on around them. So it's a program I strongly recommend. And the resources at the end of the slides, it's listed so that you know where to get it. Okay, using visual aids to help them establish a sensory diet. A sensory diet is something that you do every day. It has to be part of their routine. You may use some visual aids or schedules, whatever you have to do to help them realize they have to plug in these sensory experiences. Oftentimes, schedules are merely what you have to do. They list the chores and the things that you have to do in a day. Well, but they don't list the pleasure things. They don't show how you build in pleasurable things into your life. I mean, typical people don't have, you give them some spare time and they know what to do that they enjoy doing. But for an autistic individual, they need to have permission and they need to know that it's okay. And they need to know where to build it in during their day. Otherwise, they're going to spend their entire day doing pleasurable things and ignore the things they have to do. Or they're going to be feeling like they have to do, and they're going to rebel against it because all they see are things they have to do that they know are hard. And they don't see where they're going to have the pleasurable things in life. So achieve a balance and help them achieve a balance by showing them they have to plug into their schedule these sensory things that help them to get through the things that are more difficult in their life, so that there is a balance between work and leisure for them, and what they feel is leisure and what they think is work. All right, in the classroom, what can you do as far as achieving some kind of a sensory balance? You can see the difference between those who are, there are typical kids that just have a lot of energy. And they're going to seem the kind that are excited, they're eager, they ask a lot of questions, they're anxious to try things. Okay, this is just your typical kid with high energy. But you get to your hypersensitive kid, where they're anxious, they're easily distracted, they're hesitant, uncomfortable. This is how you recognize your hypersensitive kid. The kid's getting too much input, doesn't know what to do with it all. And or your sensory avoider, who is someone who, in reaction to too much input, tends to look everywhere but where they should be looking. They make sounds or talk incessantly. They're creating their own input. They try to escape situations they refuse to try, or they will seek to control the situation. These are characteristics of the sensation avoider, which is simply this same person in how they react to it. These down the center are typical kids in terms of, here are the responses of people who are just right. Just right energy, here you have passive learners and you have active learners. But it's these four corners in which you get the extremes. So this is an active avoider versus the passive, who simply is overwhelmed and reacts to being overwhelmed but doesn't do anything about it. This is the more active learner who takes charge and avoids or tries to control. The same thing with those who are receiving too little input. They're undersensitive. They're not focused. They're overly focused on one thing. It's hard to get their attention, or their attention wanders very easily. Their responses are slow or delayed. That's how you recognize the passive but understimulated learner. Versus those who are more active, you're going to see the sensation seeker. The one that is, I don't care what's going on around me, I'm going to do my own thing. And they're going to distract themselves. They're not distracted by the environment. They distract themselves and others from the environment. They will shift their focus or attention very easily to anything that's new or interesting or exciting because they're looking for stimulation. They're constantly active. They're talking but with no apparent goal or purpose. They're just creating. They're the sensation. They create their own sensations and ignore what else is going on because that's not stimulating enough or it doesn't get their attention enough. So if you are an educator, do we have any educators here in the class, in the room? Ah, good. Okay. Well, at least you can take that back to school. But for parents that are here, be aware of how your child may be responding in the classroom so that you can help the educator to understand what kind of a learner they are, what they need to get them to that just right state, depending on whether they are more passive or more active in terms of how they deal with things. Okay, problems that often contribute to attention difficulties. Those that are hypersensitive or tend to be avoiders, they're often easily lost or confused. They've too much. They can't filter out. They can't decide, what am I supposed to be paying attention to? There's just too much going on around them. They're being expected to shift their attention or multitask, which they can't do, so they feel overwhelmed by it. They may be given instructions that they can't understand because the instructions are given verbally and they really respond better to what they see or what they do rather than what they hear. Or even when they are focused, they're being interrupted. Teachers coming along saying, good job, I like how you're doing that. Well, if they're hyper-focused on getting it done, that is a form of interruption, and they become overwhelmed, and it's hard for them to go back to the task. So these are some of the problems that can make the situation worse for them. What will make the situation worse for someone who's undersensitive or a sensation seeker is having to wait. Oh, that is just terrible. They need the stimulation and they need it now. Having something that is not of any interest to them or not understanding the goal, you're increasing the problems. They need help, but they don't know what kind of help, and they don't know how to ask for it because, for the most part, they tend to be fairly passive, and they just don't know what to do, so they create their own rather than seek or ask for help. So those are things that you might look at yourself and say, okay, is this what's going on? Am I contributing to the problems with what I am doing or expecting of them? Some of the solutions is if they're easily distracted, you want to control the environment, make the environment consistent and structure. You want to control your own actions and communication. Don't overwhelm them with giving them too much information or too fast. Remember that watching is a form of learning. They have videotapes out there for golfers and tennis players that research has shown that these people, if they watch the video, actually improve their game as much as if they went out and practiced. Because you put into your visual memory that memory of what it is you're supposed to be doing, what is the correct response. And so watching is learning. Oftentimes I have teachers that say, well, they have to participate or they're not learning. And they push them to participate when the individual can't filter things out, they can't figure out what it is they're supposed to do, they're so anxious. And if they were merely allowed to sit and watch, that gives them the processing time to know what to focus on and to get themselves ready. And once they know, they can say, yeah, I can do that. And they can go ahead and try it, and they're going to be successful. But pushing them to perform before they have any clue what's being expected, what they're supposed to be doing, and the anxiety and fear of expectations and failure is bound to be doomed. So encouraging them to watch, if they have any resistance whatsoever, is a great tool. Giving questions or instructions in visual or written form so that they can process it better than the auditory is another great strategy. Don't ask or comment if they're focused. If they're already focused on it, don't interrupt them with verbal things that will require them to shift their attention away to find out what's going on. Leave them be. Let them be focused on it. Okay, for those that are under stimulation, what can you do? Have waiting tasks available. In other words, while you're waiting for your turn, here's some fidget toys that you can manipulate in your hands that gives you something to do but isn't disturbing to anybody else while you're waiting your turn. That gives them what to do when they have to wait, which is very difficult for them. Make the goal much more stimulating than, okay, we need to do 5 math problems here, and they're like, I don't know, and they're bored after they've done the first 2, they don't need to do 10. So you let them know, okay, for every 3 problems you do, if you call me, I'll check them and give you a stamp or a sticker. Oh, okay, I can do that. Now you do another 3 problems. You get a stamp or a sticker. So very quickly they get something that's very stimulating and interesting to them. So their rewards come much more quickly and more frequently. That will keep them motivated to keep going. Using a signal or asking if you can help to prompt them if they aren't asking for help. You see that they're not performing. You can either use a signal that you've worked out ahead of time. In other words, this questioning, do you need help? They know to recognize if you do this, that, do they need some help, a tap on the shoulder, you negotiate with them. What would work for me to get your attention? And I've done this with some of my students. And I'd said, what does it take for me to get your attention? I'm having real trouble getting your attention. What will it take? And then I give options, so they have choices. If I tap you on the shoulder, does that get your attention? If I wave my hands like this, does that get your attention? If I, and we'll explore things, and they'll usually be able to tell me from the option which they would be most comfortable with. And then I know. When I need their attention because their attention is wandering, I know how to get it back. And we've already agreed upon it. All right, some suggestions for providing a sensory diet at school, because that's a good part of their day. Certainly, if they're having difficulties, and this comes from sensory motor issues in autism, they recommend, to calm them down using visuals, a study carrel to block things out, using a slant board that brings things right up into their focus right here in front of them, using room dividers. For those that needing alerting, using bright lights. Now, I had one student that would stare at the fluorescent lights, which for me were like, whoa, way too much. But he would say, but it helps me to focus better. He needed that kind of intense input of staring at fluorescent lights for a while, then he could come back to the task. And it worked for him. Sound, touch. These are simply other additional examples of what can be calming, what can be alerting, depending on what they need. These are examples from the catalogs in terms of, as you see, he's using that where's my little light there? He's using a cushion that you could sit on, but as a lap weight. Instead of sitting on it, he's using it as a lap weight that calms him down. Whereas if he needed it for stimulation, he would be sitting on it because it would provide him with movement. But here it just provides him with that. Having a fidget toy available, so he can fidget with it when he needs a break. Having the headphones to block out the sounds of the other kids rustling the paper, shifting in their chairs. The headphones help him to block out and filter out the extraneous noises that would be distracting for him, so that he can focus. He also, if you can see, has something on the end of his pencil. That heavy weight gives him a better feel and grip on his pencil. He's got that heavy weight that actually is very calming because it stimulates the muscles and joints. So it helps him stay focused on what he's doing. And I think, you can barely see, he even has something in his mouth. There's a sucker or something in his mouth. You can see that little lump there. So you can see he has a whole combination, an arsenal of tools that he can use that help him to meet his needs. So it's making the individual aware of their sensory needs, aware of what brings them pleasure, what they find overwhelming or stimulating, and then adjusting to come up with the right tools that they need for whatever situation they're in that helps them to maintain focus. These are other suggestions in terms of something to suck on. This is just fish tubing put on top of a pencil for chewing on, for those kids that are going to chew on safe. And it's just fish tubing putting on top of that. So it's something safe, sanitary, that can be put in the dishwasher at night to give them that oral input that they need. Backpacks are great for the heavy weight that they provide. Things that you can manipulate in your hands. They even have certain smells. There's a whole a list of things that helps you to focus, to concentrate, that are stimulatory, that are very calming. Just having that available for those in which smell kinds of things can help them. Things that they can manipulate in their hands that are stimulatory, like this furry little thing. You just put the stimulation around the palm of their hand or around their mouth where the most tactile receptors are. And boy, alerting within a very short period of time, they're going to be far more alert. So there are lots and lots of tools out there, lots of possibilities that you can explore. Providing sensory breaks at school, asking the teacher to have them be the one that carries books to or from the library, or they can rearrange the desks. These are all possible things that they can do to give them the kind of input that they need to help them refocus. And they're purposeful, and they end within 5 minutes. So it's a great break. It has to end within 5 minutes, and they have to be ready and that just right state at the end of 5 minutes. I know this one story of a young lady who was given the job for this very reason, of taking the chairs down at the beginning of the day and putting them back up but when the kids went home. She took it, not only did it help her to calm herself down to get ready for school when she got there, because she had a chore task to do that was very calming for her, and then at the end of the day, that transition back home, again, it was very focusing and calming, gave her some closure to the day. Plus, she felt so good about it. This is my job. When this gets done, it's because I did it. And it gave her a tremendous feeling of self-worth as well. Okay, these are some what I call in-class stretch breaks without getting out of their chair. Depending on whether you want them to calm down, they do slow stretches that contract the muscles versus simple movements that pep them up. And it was interesting, I had a regular education class in which there were special education students incorporated, and I directed them in first these activities, then these activities, and then I would ask for a show of hands, those who had their favorite set, where one helped them more than the other. And I mean, I could pick them out when I walked in the classroom as to which ones were understimulated, which ones were overstimulated. And invariably, they were the ones that picked their hand up and, oh, I really like these, or I really like those, that set. But it's something that a teacher can do when she sees the class deteriorating as far as their ability to attend. All right, let's take a 5-minute exercise break without getting out of the chairs. That can get them to refocus. So, better balance means better performance. And in this particular cartoon, you can see where she's in a very bad mood, so she gets on the swing. The higher she swings, the better she feels. And of course, the joke is it's a mood swing. But it can make a huge difference in the course of the day. And my motto is feed the need. When there is a sensory need, and there's a need to balance the stresses in life with things that you find pleasurable, things that you find help you to perform the tasks that are being expected of you, that's a big thing, and it's very, very, very important. Are there any questions that I can answer about instances in you or your child's life that where you have experienced difficulty and where there's far more stress than you think there should be? Question? It gets stuck on that, yeah. We can fluctuate. Oh, no question. We can be one way one time and another the other time. We do the extremes extremely well. It's that middle ground, that just right zone that we have trouble finding and staying in. So, yes, we do the extremes. Now, the question that she asked was, what about after school? And that is a real challenge time for a lot of our kids. When they are coming home from school, they're exhausted because they have worked so hard to just maintain the appropriate behavior that's being expected of them at school. And now they have to have chores and as well as homework that they have to face when they get home. She also mentioned that one of her children gets on the computer, can't get off. The other one gets off fine. Yeah, oh yeah, and they're just two very different children. They can be at one extreme or the other extreme. And the one that is on the computer and is trouble getting off is, yes, playing games. And again, there's two ways. He can be using it as a source of, this is stimulating me, this is getting me up, it's refreshing me because I'm exhausted. This gets me stimulated, I need this kind of stimulation. But it also could be an avoiding mechanism. He is avoiding what he knows is going to be really, really hard for him, which is tackling the homework. I mean, his brain is wiped out. And I have found from myself, my own experiences, that playing games on the computer does nothing to get me into a just right state. It's a way of avoiding tasks that I have to do. I have to put limits on myself if I'm allowed after lunch. I can do my games. I can do them only at certain times, and I have to establish rules. Now, we are very good at following rules. So if you establish rules that this is how much time you can give, if you think it's an avoiding thing. But the computer doesn't feed our senses. And it's our senses that are going to change and get us to that just right state. We need input through our sensory systems. And game playing on the computer does not provide sensory unless it's truly excitatory and he's sensation-seeking. And if you can find that after X amount of time playing on the computer that he is ready to tackle these other chores, then it's not a good tool for him. It's not a good sensory tool. It doesn't help him to get to that just right state. So you talk to him and say, all right, this is what we need to have happen. How are you going to get there? And does this help you to get there? Well, then he has to prove it. Then he has to prove it. If he says yes. You test it. You have to agree with him. Okay, we're problem solving. This is a challenge. This is what needs to happen, and it's not happening. So what do we need to do to make it happen? So he will say, okay, I need time to play on this. Well, how much time do you need? Okay, if he says 2 hours, you're going to say, well, then we can't get any other things that we need done. That's too much time. So realistically, how much time do you need? Okay, you set the boundaries in terms of what's a choice, what's not a choice. So, all right, if you negotiate on 30 minutes, okay, you have him try 30 minutes. At the end of the 30 minutes, here's what's supposed to happen. He needs to be ready to start on his homework or his chores or whatever it is that needs to happen at that time. If he is not ready, then it wasn't a good choice. It didn't work. It's not an effective tool to help him get there. So you have to say, okay, we need to either look at other times or other options. So here's your other choices. Besides the computer, what else could you try? That if he's looking for stimulation, you try some of the stimulating activities, if that's what he truly needs, and see if they work better. And then you can save the computer time as part of his schedule as a reinforcement that he can use when his chores are done. Running around in the yard, playing, vestibular stimulation, anything that gives him a chance to move, any of those things that are very alerting or stimulating. Say, okay, that may not be the right tool for you to do that. I think it's a great activity because it's something you enjoy, and that should be in your routine. He should have it as part of his routine so he knows he's going to get it. But it's not the right tool for this, to help him get to the ready state to do homework. Okay. Again, you put it in terms of, is it helping you to get where you want to go or where you need to go? And if it's not helping, in other words, if you can't let go, see, not finishing things. And this is a problem with some of these games. They go on forever. There's no end to them. He wants to finish because he can't stand to leave something unfinished. And I know that feeling. you need to find games that are self-limiting. They reach a point where it's end, he's won or lost. So find games that are shorter and self-limiting. They don't go on for hours. And allow him to play those games. And, okay, you can do 2 games. And then when you win or lose, it's going to be time. That'll be 30 minutes. So discover and negotiate between the two of you. Well, that's not working. Well, you know, and basically what you're saying is if he says 1 more minute, you'll say, oh, dear, this wasn't a good tool, was it? It didn't get you ready because you're not ready. So it's not a good tool, which means we better toss it out. It's not a good choice anymore. Let's look at some other choices. Well, you know what? It's like the kid with the bubble gum. If he wants it, he'll make it work. Otherwise, he loses it. And that's motivation enough to say if he wants this to be a tool that he can use, he better make it work, which means he's got to be ready when that timer goes off. Okay, in the evening, especially when he's playing those video games, they're very stimulating. They're all very stimulating. Yes, and his nervous system is so wired up, he doesn't know how to come down, which may mean you have to say, okay, you need to be ready for bed by such and such a time. And I have noticed that when you play these games, you get so stimulated, you don't know how to come down. So he either has to stop the stimulating games by a certain time so that he can do calming activities that help him to get ready. So you're not saying he can't do the things that he finds pleasurable. You're just saying the time of day. You need to stop by such and such a time so that you have time to do some calming activities to bring you down so you can fall asleep when it's time. You set the goal, and then you problem solve like a detective with him, what works and what doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, well, then it's not a choice because it's not working to accomplish this goal. Calming activities are review through all of those suggestions that I had on there and the handouts and stuff in terms of what works on a sensory diet is what's stimulating, what's not stimulating, and help him then choose among those. Let's try these other things. Let's see what works. So for the last hour before he goes to bed, he has to allow enough time to do some calming activities that he knows calms himself down so that he's ready to sleep. And it's a matter of playing detective with him and say, here's the thing, it's got to happen. We have no choice. This is a rule. We do well with rules. Just tell us it's a rule. You have to be in bed by such and such a time so you have enough sleep. So what are we going to do? And you engage him in the cognitive thinking of what are we going to do? Here's your choices. These are things that would work. But if you think this is going to work, you're going to have to prove it to me. And if it doesn't work, then it's not a good choice. And we'll have to eliminate it. And if he wants to make it work, more power to him. That motivation, he wants it, so he's going to calm himself down. He's going to get himself to bed by that time. Question? Mm-hmm. No. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, he could. Yeah. And actually, his sense of smell is very alerting for him. And actually, he probably likes it because it has the smell of people. And he recognizes that smell. And so it's very comforting to him. Now, yes, you can go, and I would, candles tend to have what we call pleasurable things that are calming to you, those kinds of smells. I would go to a store that, one of these yuppie kinds of stores that sells all kinds of smells, oils, the essential oils that Yes, and you can find some that are pretty obnoxious smells. And he may be very attracted to the very obnoxious, and just have him explore. But candles, they make them for the specific, candles are supposed to be relaxing. And so they're going to put relaxing, and that's not what he's saying he needs. He likes the stimulation. He likes the intensity of that smell. So, find sources that will, and they can actually, you can put these essential oils on like there's a little stone that you can wear as a necklace. You put it on there, and he can just sniff it whenever he wants to. In terms of, well, now you make a rule. Remember, we're rule-oriented. The rule is that people, and assert your rights. I don't like when people smell my shoes. I don't like that. And other people don't like it. So therefore, there's a rule that people don't do that because other people don't like it, which is the truth. Never tell a lie to an autistic individual. We value the truth so highly. So you really must tell the truth, and that is the truth. People do not like it when other people smell their shoes. And so therefore, it's a rule that we don't do that. So let's find something else that you like to smell that is okay with other people and that you're allowed to do. So you put it in terms of looking at, and this is what we'll talk about next time, of the strengths. How can you play into our strengths, the things that we value in life, that are important to us? How can you play into that and help us to learn what we need to learn? And in this particular case, appeal to his sense of what is right and just, and that you don't break rules. These are rules. But if he has a need, let's find another way to meet that need. And let's go to the store and smell these smells and find something else that you enjoy. Yes, yes. Yes, replace it with something that's more socially acceptable. But remember, there is a need. Don't take it away because he is expressing a need for that kind of input. It does something, it helps him. So don't take it away. But replace it with something else that he agrees, okay, I can smell this instead when I feel like I need to smell that. And it can be if you wear a particular perfume or essence, they even have human pheromones, the smell of people in oils. So, yeah, explore that.